Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing something a little different. We're going to decode a completely fascinating, highly theoretical, and frankly, absolutely mind-expanding postdoctoral thesis by Benoit Nunez-Lapierre. It's basically a blueprint for our hyper-accelerated future. We're looking at what actually happens when artificial intelligence, human biology, and global infrastructure all just collide at once. So, let's explore this together. Right off the bat, Nunez-Lapierre makes a bold claim. We're no longer just researching the future. We're accelerating it. And that completely shifts the stakes here. We aren't sitting around studying what might happen next. We're actively living through this massive intertwined evolution of humanity and technology. Now, I know this might sound straight out of a science fiction movie, but I promise you, it's a rigorously constructed academic framework. It's a literal map for a real civilizational shift. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our roadmap for decoding this incredibly dense blueprint. First, we'll look at the quantum AI brain. Then, the post-labor economy. Third is designing the human body. Fourth, we've got the patchwork communal city. And finally, defending our open future. But wait, before we hit that first pillar, we've got to tackle this massive 30-letter tongue twister the author uses to define this whole era. Ready? Socio-theo-techno-geopolitics. Yeah, try saying that 3 times fast. I know, it looks super intimidating, but it's actually a really beautiful concept. It simply means that our technology, our global politics, our social structures, and our deepest human beliefs, they're no longer going to operate in separate little silos. They're merging into one single indivisible ecosystem. You literally can't change the technology without changing the theology or the politics. It's the whole shebang, all connected as one. All right, let's get into part 1, the quantum AI brain. To really wrap our heads around this first major layer, the computational brain that's powering this entirely new civilization, the author introduces this concept of a 1000 IQ outcome. Now pause for a second. Forget the whole Hollywood trope of a giant, menacing supercomputer taking over the world. That's not what this is. In this context, that 1000 IQ number represents a highly decentralized, hyper-efficient, invisible intelligence. Think of it more like the ultimate city planner and logistics manager. An intelligence capable of solving unbelievably complex supply chain and energy problems and doing it at basically zero marginal cost. And this brings us to a massive paradigm shift. Think about classical geopolitics. That's our current world, right? Nations fighting over land, labor, and capital. It's a world entirely defined by friction and scarcity. But Nunez-Lapierre introduces what he calls quantum nupopolitics. Imagine a world where an AI can instantly simulate and just solve resource scarcity through pure information and morphological access. When you do that, the traditional drivers of war and conflict, they're effectively liquidated. Poof! We enter a completely frictionless society. So if the brain is doing all that, it leads us to part 2, the post-labor economy. Which naturally begs a very urgent question, doesn't it? If a 1000 IQ artificial intelligence is solving all our logistical problems and producing all our goods, what exactly happens to our jobs? Well, what's really interesting here is how the author answers that. A post-labor economy absolutely does not mean we all just sit around consuming entertainment all day. No way. That would completely collapse human dignity. Instead, human effort is redirected toward high-status, contribution-centered roles. We're talking about care and elder mentorship, civic design, ecological stewardship, education, child development, and spiritual and cultural transmission. Basically, we shift from mundane wage labor to a literal renaissance of human purpose. So, okay, the economic layer is solved, and our daily purpose is elevated. But the framework pushes things even further. If we aren't using our bodies for grueling manual survival, what actually happens to our physical bodies in a post-labor world? That question takes us right into part 3, designing the human body. Guys, this brings us to the most radical and honestly fascinating frontier of this entire civilizational acceleration, applying CRISPR technology to our very biology. The text introduces a concept called morphological freedom. The best way to think about this, it's like the ultimate transgenerational character customization screen, but for real human biology. The author argues that in this hyper-accelerated future, individuals and communities are going to have the fundamental right to intentionally sculpt their own biological form. We're talking about actively rewriting our genetic architecture to adapt, to heal, and to truly flourish. Now, obviously the crucial point here is how this incredible power is governed because, well, the risks are pretty obvious. The author explicitly divides this into two very different paths. On one hand, you have therapeutic freedom, which is strictly used to reduce suffering, extend health span, and expand human flourishing. This is sharply contrasted with competitive eugenics, which is driven by a desire for superiority, ranking, and hereditary advantage. The framework firmly, and I mean firmly, rejects that second path. It insists that these genetic tools must be used for what he beautifully calls the covenantal stewardship of our shared human kin matrix, rather than using it as a way to create, biological castes. Moving right along, let's explore part 4, the patchwork communal city. So, we have the mind, the economy, and the body all figured out. But where do these newly augmented, post-labor humans actually live out their daily lives? Well, the author completely rejects the centralized bureaucracy and coercive uniform control of a universal state. But he equally rejects the dystopian velvet cage of a corporate smart city, the kind where every monocentric sensor is just tracking you for capital gain. Instead, we get this smart hub patchwork, and this brilliantly illustrates how we avoid those traps. These are interoperable, self-governing nodes. Imagine incredibly diverse cultural neighborhoods. Maybe one is deeply traditional, while another right next door is hyper-modern. But they all coordinate voluntarily through a frictionless underlying technology. And in these patchwork cities, the technology isn't constantly in your face. The author uses this great phrase, infrastructure as atmosphere. Think about Wi-Fi 7 and 8, the Internet of Things, hyper-advanced quantum grids. They all operate as invisibly and pervasively as the oxygen we breathe. It's truly breathtaking to imagine. The technology doesn't monitor you to control you. It just quietly and perfectly supports the rhythms of your daily life, whether that's spending time with family, engaging in prayer, or building up your local community. It is a fully frictionless environment. Which brings us to our final pillar, Part 5, Defending our Open Future. Now you might be wondering, any system this advanced and this reliant on perfect coordination is bound to have vulnerabilities, right? How does a highly open, frictionless society actually defend itself from existential threats or collapse? Well, in this framework, defense means defensive civilizational resilience. Think about it. If a shock hits the system, do the hospitals still run? Surviving those shocks requires building extreme redundancy and auditability. It means ensuring human command responsibility over the AI and intensely cyber-hardening our local food and energy infrastructure. With strong democratic oversight of automation, you ensure that a single cyber attack or natural disaster literally cannot cause the entire patchwork to unravel. This brings us to the core warning, and really the ultimate philosophy of this entire thesis. Let me read this part to you. Quote, "The highest intelligence is not raw computation. It is coordination without dehumanization, acceleration without social rupture." End quote. It's absolutely crucial. If we just build massive AI and let it run wild, we get cold, soulless optimization. To actually succeed, this 1000 IQ system has to be permanently anchored to human embodiment, human meaning, and human dignity. Wow, we've explored a massive meta-theoretical blueprint today, a world where AI handles the logistics, where labor transitions to care and creation, where we shape our own biology, and where we live in diverse, frictionless communal hubs. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with the ultimate question this text asks of us. When the friction of survival is finally removed by technology, what will you actually choose to do with your existence? It's a profound thought, and it's something we all need to start thinking about right now. Thanks so much for learning with me today.